One.
Welcome to the Rejuvenating Healers show, where we are an educational platform exploring and bridging ancient and modern wisdom to develop new systems that support the entire community as a whole. So I want to welcome my co-host Charlie,
Hello,
the
everyone.
doctor to be, and I'm Nurse D. Together, we are holding this space to discuss all things related to health and supporting our caregivers. So, really excited to be here today on Valentine's Day to kick off our new show and to talk about all things related to heart health. So, wow, Charlie, we're here. We're doing it. We're talking about heart health. We're going to be going through TCM's perspective of heart health, some new research, some giving some tools that the audience can practice. And also, I would love to share that even if you aren't a caregiver yourself, this show is very relevant to you as we're all in relationship to each other. So, the health of your caregiver who's taking care of you or a family member, their health directly impacts you. And also, we're all healers. So, it's more about awakening the healer within all of us. So,
Exactly. I mean, imagine parents, right? They have to be healers. They have children to take care of, right? And so
oh my
they're
gosh.
healers. And so the idea that you have to get a degree to be healers actually makes no sense at all.
Yeah, I know. I actually had this conversation with my mom yesterday because I was asking her. This is a little bit of a tangent, but we're going to get to it down the show. I was asking her like how many of her brothers and sisters were born in the home, and she's like, "Oh, all of us were born at home, except for my one of my uncles who was like a bigger baby or something." And I was like, "Oh, well, so like who helps my abuelita with like delivering you guys?" And she's like, "Oh, like my grandmother." And it was just like, so anyway, we'll get to that and we'll cover that in a separate episode, birthing and modern age and all of that goodness. But today we're here to talk about heart health and heart disease and heart, all things related to heart. So I'm really excited to do that. And I want to start off with why we feel this topic is so important. By the way, you look fabulous in that red shirt.
Thank you. Thank you. This is for Valentine's Day, everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Trying to
Um,
channel the inner heart.
yeah, exactly. So I love it, and I had to do the same here a little bit.
Yes, you look so beautiful today.
Thank
Yes.
you, thank you. So why we're here? Heart disease, number one leading cause of death of in Americans in the U.S. And we're not talking. This isn't new. This has been for how many? Let's pull up the stats and see what we got, Charlie. Wow.
Yo.
Mm-hmm.
So we have here on the left side here, this is the stats actually before COVID, so up to 2017, because everything these days now is we have to reference the age of COVID, right?
I
Because
know.
everything's changed since then.
Pre and post.
However, knowing full well COVID happened, look at it on the right side, right? Actually, after COVID in 2020, COVID was third on the list. So COVID did not beat heart problems. So we as a country are still dealing with heart problems, whatever those diseases look like.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's pretty detrimental, and I think that all of us can think of if we're not experiencing any symptoms or issues related to heart or diabetes or these other kind of comorbidities, we know somebody or in our family that's dealing with it. And I know that I mean, I've been in pediatric nursing for my entire nursing career, so it's very different than adult heart issues. But Charlie, I'm curious, like, what are you seeing in the acupuncture clinic?
So a lot of times what we run into is we're much closer to the beginning of the heart disease, because the jurisdiction for acupuncture is we do not deal with like basically borderline heart strokes, right? If someone's gonna have stroke, we don't touch them, we send them straight to ER. So
Yeah.
this is kind of where Traditional Chinese medicine and Eastern medicine, actually, we are mostly based on the um, re keeping a disease from actually taking hold of the patient, right? So we're really good with before the disease happens. Once you're at the stroke section, you're really at the end of the progression of the disease, right? Once you get a stroke, it's kind of the end of the disease, and most likely without surgery, you're not necessarily going to survive that. So we do kind of see patients, and we always check for vital signs. So we check blood pressure, and at any point there's blood pressure that's really high, or maybe their left side is becoming numb or really tight, we do send them off to the ER. However, before that, we do have a lot of people who come in with high blood pressure or any kind of like heart problems. Sometimes we get people who got a stint done, right? Whatever bypass, and then they'll come later on because they're slowly another attack of heart disease, right? So we then want to keep it from getting to the point where a stroke is inevitable.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point when you were talking about that, if somebody comes in and they're kind of on the verge of stroke or blood pressure is extremely high, that, you just send them to the ER and whatnot, because that really kind of just reinforces like how valuable modern medicine is today, and how and that it really isn't an either or when we talk about modalities like traditional Chinese medicine or emergency medicine. It's an and conversation, and also we know that modern medicine is failing to keep people healthy. So I would love to learn more and for you to share more about the TCM perspective on heart health and general. And let's just go ahead and dive into that. If that.
Sure. And so, in my school, we are actually doing the integration of the East and West, and that's a very important conversation. And so, what I've experienced is that there's a place for both. And if we saw it in both, and this is where we should have the conversation of healthcare versus sick care, right? When we talk about sick care, we're talking about emergency care. Emergency care does great at hospitals because they'll cut you up and go in there, right? But how many of us want to get cut up maybe for like, you might have a heart disease? Well, that's no need to be cut up. So where traditional Chinese medicine is really good at, basically traditional Chinese medicine was just what people did before they got sick,
Mm-hmm.
right? We saw signs of people getting sick beforehand in their bodies. And so we would actually give them medicine or tweak their energetic fields, their meridians, so that they're not getting closer to this heart disease and heart attack problem. So that's kind of where what's happened is without the what we call the wellness care, which is sustaining people when they're a little bit sick, right? Because right now, when you're a little bit sick, you're kind of thrown home with some medicine. You're not really looked at, you're not really taken care of. And so what happened is these people don't even know that they're going down a bad slope of problems.
Yeah.
And they're just told, take these medicine and hopefully you will stop the sloping to stroke mode. And you're like, you're just telling me to like take these pills and like hope my fingers are crossed so that I don't die.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where why there hasn't been any kind of middle ground. So if there is a middle ground, where hopefully we will address these crazy heart disease problems, right? Because you can see heart disease and cancer were the top two. The third was the last three, four, five, six, seven disease combined didn't actually reach the number that heart disease causes, right? And so it's a very important conversation because you can see that we already have surgery today, but we still have such a high number of heart disease happening still. So that means that surgical and emergency medicine is not the treatment to deal with heart disease, right? Because by the time they're getting to the door and they're knocking on your door saying, "Hey, I'm almost dead," they're going to be statistics in this on this number curve. So that's why what we try to do in traditional medicine is catch all these beforehand.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think it is really unfortunate that it gets to that, for many of our loved ones. I know that heart disease is rampant in my family, especially on my maternal side, like largely related to diet and you know, stress and all of these things that we know, which we could go deeper into as like what is the cause of that stress. But I think that you know, it's important to keep in mind that while these emergency interventions are useful at maybe saving someone's life in that moment, that what is it really doing to support, and especially if we're talking about caregivers too, right, like who are highly stressed and not eating well and not maybe not exercising or prioritizing, you know, things for themselves, not feeling like they have community, like how can we give them more than just the pill, you know, or say, hey, change your diet, or you got to exercise and this and that. And it's like there's so many more layers to that to break down, and then to just like send somebody off and say, you know, do this, this, and this. And when we're talking about behavioral patterns and, you know, again, the mind, right? So yeah, I'm just really excited to learn more from you about TCM's perspective in preventing all of this and how to live well, really.
Yes, yes. So I'm really excited to kind of prep you all. I'm building a studying with Charlie. Basically, as I study through my boards, I will actually build a simplified lesson curriculum to really explain traditional Chinese medicine to everyday people. I feel like there's a way to understand our body. So instead of biology 101, maybe we do biology plus TCM, right? And we're getting the biology perspective of, you know, the Eastern perspective of our biology. And so this is really beautiful how it's important to understand what the heart does, because if you understand what the heart does, you understand then its pathology, the patterns of disease. And then from there, you understand how heart disease is actually created. Because a lot of times what's happened is we tend to focus on heart disease to go straight to the physical heart to deal with it. And maybe all of the factors that came along to make this heart a problem isn't very looked at, because all you're now looking at is just a physical heart. And so this is where understanding what the heart does beyond just a pumping blood machine could give us a little
Yeah.
bit more insight on how it works in our body, mind, and spirit.
Oh, I love that. So this is the great reveal.
Yes, yes. Now, I'm a big perfectionist with visuals, and so I'm letting you guys see like this is kind of like a very draft version of it. I'm hoping that eventually it looks much nicer. I mean, you can see some other slides that I've been working on. You can see like this is a much more polished slide, compared to
Great.
like this is more like, you know, I put everything down there, but I had the essence of it, and then eventually I will make it a little bit nicer. But today I really wanted to share a little glimpse of how the heart fits into the story of traditional Chinese medicine. So in TCM, we have basically what we call these organs are separated into what we call yin yang organs. So I don't want to go into yin yang today. However, this idea is that there are organs that actually hold liquids, and then there are organs that are empty until you digest through them. So the digestion system is one system versus the organs that hold liquids. And so the heart holds a liquid, blood, the liver holds blood, the lungs holds air, the spleen holds the chemicals that make digestion work, and the kidneys hold water and the water filtration. So those organs require liquids to be inside them so that your body runs. And so the idea of yin yang is kind of like how you say you need gasoline, which is yin, to support the action of moving a car, which is yang. Okay. So for your body to actually be moving, you need the physical element of blood. And that blood is what we call the yin. So the heart is considered basically the most important organ in the entire 12 set of organs that we have in our body in traditional medicine. And so the heart is considered commonly the ruler or the emperor of all the organs. And it's because it's really making all the decisions, right? So it's in charge of governing blood in the body, right? And so we understand that a little bit more like the human circulatory system. We understand governing blood, meaning that the movement of blood happens because of the pumping action of the heart. And so it also controls the blood vessels. And we say that because a lot of times when you have blood vessel problems, you have to look at the heart because maybe the heart is not pumping enough to get the blood to those vessels. We understand that in Western medicine very clearly. We call that the human circulatory system. So we're not very much in different towns here. We're exactly in the same city, talking about the same thing, whether you're in the East and the West, right? Which is brilliant because I'm glad no one invented anything. It's literally what the body is doing. And so those blood vessels show up everywhere. They show up in our skin, in our muscles, in our sinews, what we call sinews. And then we have bones that have muscles too, blood vessels too. So blood is super important in our body because blood actually rejuvenates, right? Rejuvenate healers, meaning when you have fresh blood, you are rejuvenating yourself. But if those blood vessels are not bringing fresh blood into your body parts that could be, have a problem, then that's when you're not rejuvenating that part of your body. And so really, this same idea is the whole body's, if you call it like a bottle of blood, right? So if the blood is filled, but your face is pale, you are blood deficient because the blood can't even come to your face to give you color, right? This is why, like, when people lose a ton of blood, what happens? They go pale, right? To the point where they go green because there's no more color on their face. So a lot of times what we do when people come in, we pay attention to their face, right? And so in traditional medicine, the most important part of treating somebody is understanding the diagnosis of what's going internally. So a lot of times, if you've ever been in an acupuncturist office, you probably wonder why we ask you a whole bunch of questions. We take pictures of your face or your tongue. We look at your ears. We look at your hands. We look at your hair. We look at your face. Because all of these are actually labs. Like imagine getting lab work because your heart is telling you, hey, I'm deficient in blood. Look at your face. You don't even have blood in your face, right?
And you actually touch patients too, right?
Yes, exactly.
The pulse, right? Feel the
Yes,
pulse.
exactly. So we do also pulse testing, right? So we check pulses on both sides. We actually use 3 fingers, not one. We don't check for one pulse. We actually check for 3 different types of pulses on each hand because each pulse is a reflection of one of the internal organs. So what's really beautiful about traditional medicine is we didn't have computers back in the days. We just looked at somebody, we touched their pulse, we asked them to stick out their tongue, we looked at their eyes and complexion, and we understood what was going internally. And that's super important today that we've lost, right? Because today, how often do you have to wait for how many days now to get a lab turnaround? You probably have to go get blood drawn. You have to wait for the blood test. And then a week later, your doctor has to explain to you what the blood test means, right?
And also just to touch on the issues with those labs, the traditional labs that are done, especially kind of like there's some useful ones in emergency situations, but like a regular panel just gives you a snapshot as to what's happening in that exact moment on that day at that time. So by the time you get the results, everything's different. So it really actually is not an indicator of
Right.
much,
Exactly.
So
Exactly. If anything, your diagnosis is always behind.
right.
Right. And so for us, it's super important that we actually look at this. And so actually a real good traditional medicine doctor will look at somebody very quickly and infer almost half of the problems they're having. And then they would actually touch you, ask you questions to confirm everything they're already seeing from looking at you.
Right.
However, today we invented makeup.
Oh yeah, that's
And
right.
because of the invention of makeup, having rosy cheeks, right? But then you're actually pale because you have no blood could make it very confusing for us to kind of go, wait, do you have rosy cheek or do you have makeup on, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a very interesting conversation we're having today where people are actually covering the symptoms of their body, right? And so this is kind of where, like, back in the days, we used to talk about how what's inside of you that is more beautiful will actually express itself in your body. And this is why when we looked at people, we're like, wow, that person looks very healthy. We didn't say they were healthy from the outside. We actually understood that internally they were healthy. And that's why their outward appearance was full of vigor, full of life. Their hair is shiny and strong, right? Versus when you have hair that's falling apart, we know internally you're not being supported, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why these are really important, this medicine that we have forgotten today that we need to bridge back, that we used to understand what was going on in our body without labs. And so today where, I love science, I love technology, I'm a computer science y'all, but the fact that we have to wait many days for a diagnosis doesn't make any sense. Your body already knows what's wrong with you and it's telling you all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why I get really nervous when we are basically turning off these alarms, right? Um, we do this often. You have pain or so fevers happens when you're getting really hot. And so now you're fighting an infection internally. So your body's fighting an infection, trying to burn up bacteria. But then you take medicine to drop the temperature down so your body no longer can fight the disease,
Exactly.
And these are the things that we have to be careful of. If we don't understand how it works, we're actually counterindicated against your body's natural rejuvenation system. Your body naturally, you guys understand, mitosis happens. And so within 7 days so certain body parts will actually within days or months to years will actually be brand new because you're constantly having mitosis. Your cells are splitting up and creating new cells.
Right.
And that's why we detox and throwing old cells away because our body is constantly generating new cells.
Right.
And that tells us that we're becoming a new person constantly. So if you are giving me labs from the Charlie that was here a week ago, you caught a Charlie that was a week old, right? And so
Right.
that's why it's really important to understand even the hearts. You have to know if you're having a heart attack right away because that's very dangerous and that's very fast. And so that's why usually when you see someone go white very quickly, you're like, oh, blood stopped,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right away, you go, that person has lost a lot of blood. You can see that one of the signs that we do for cardiac arrest, right? The face goes white. That's when we know something's up. So it's connected again to traditional medicine. Now, the really fun part is the next part here. And so those are like the physical representation of the heart. However, in traditional Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, we looked at the mind, the body, and the spirit. We actually have acupuncture points for the body, for the mind, and for the spirit. We have spirit points, we have mind points. And
Wow.
so, this next piece, what we say is the heart is really the house where the mind goes in when he wants to go to sleep. Okay. So in the daytime, they split, right? Almost kind of like you're a submarine, you put your head out and you're looking around. So the mind is active up here, but the heart is really the anchor of your, it's called the emperor. So you're making decisions there. And in the West, we already said there's I forget what it's called, but there's a sinusoidal wave that start the heartbeat, right? And it's basically an electrical current
Mm-hmm.
that triggers the heart to activate. And so this idea that the heart has neural brain, it has neural network, it's creating electro energy. That means that there's kind of like a mind there. And so this is important when we say you're going to sleep. What happens when people have a very busy mind? What happens is their brain doesn't go into their heart to close and go to sleep. The mind is turned on. It's when the mind goes into the heart that the mind shuts off and you pass out, right? This is one like when you're really mentally tired, you're like, you just pass out because the brain no longer has enough energy to stay conscious.
Right.
So it goes into the heart to sleep.
Okay. Wow.
So this is
This
where
is
like we're
just
gonna have deeper conversation, the heart mind
yeah.
correlation. But this is one of the things we pay attention to. Sleep is our number one question when we ask in diagnosis. So when we ask, are you sleeping well? Are you not sleeping? Are you having trouble falling asleep? How long does it take you to fall asleep? Those questions tell us what your body is dealing with. And so what happened is, and that's happened a lot of time recently, is we become weird sedentary now during the daytime where we should be very active. This is what we call the young time of our life. We're supposed to be active, moving, because energy is coming coursing through our body. So then that energy is depleted by the evening. When it's depleted, what happens? It closes down and shuts down because there's
Right.
no more energy to work with.
Yeah.
What happens to kids when we don't let them play around all day and then it's bedtime? How many of you guys try to make a kid go to sleep with like no physical activity that day?
Mm-hmm.
That kid cannot
Yeah.
fall asleep, right? Because they have not used up the energy that your body provides when you're awake. And so this is something that we pay attention to is if we say your mind is disturbed, you will stay awake.
Hmm.
So our job is to shut down your mind and calm your heart. And when you calm your heart, you actually become rest, you go into a safe mode. And this is going back to parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. When you're in parasympathetic, you're rest to digest. When you're sympathetic, you're fight or flight. Fight or flight means you have energy to do something. So, in our very stressful lives today, we will try to go to sleep while we're holding a pitchfork and a gun, right? Metaphorically speaking, right? And you're like, Charlie, go to sleep. Okay, but I'm holding my gun here because I'm scared. And so what happens is we're just not ready to go to sleep while our sympathetic nervous system is fully activated. So this is the idea of why we say that when your heart and your mind are frantic, you're not really focused and you can't really do anything with your mind or go to sleep. So those are very important in our medicine.
Well, and it's interesting too that you bring up this mind sleeping in the heart, because I remember, coming home from work from the hospital like late at, maybe midnight or something, and whether it was like, a regular shift or I stayed over or whatnot, I was physically exhausted, but my mind was like just on, like I could not turn it off. And I remember, I would have to go for a walk, for a little bit, and it was late, or I started to have to create these like rituals, these down regulating rituals when I got home, whether it was like I walk in, turn on my, essential oil diffuser, and then I go and then I steam in the shower and like kind of do actual like water cleanse, and then have like you just start creating these rituals
Hot
to
bath,
really,
right?
yeah, because it is so difficult. That, I mean, and that's an example of my body, like I'm physically working too, so it's not like I'm sitting on, I'm sitting and just doing nothing. It's like I'm active for 12 hours, sometimes 16 hours, and physically exhausted. But even though my body is physically exhausted, that mind aspect is not able to rest, and so how many of us, who are doing this work, are experiencing that, where we can't. And I know so many nurses and I have so many friends and colleagues that would share the same thing, like they could not go. So you know what they do? They go home and drink. And we go home and we drink because we have a glass of wine to wind down. You do whatever you need to do to shut things off. And so that's a whole nother issue. But is that the most healthy? Is that the most optimal for our bodies? I would say no, because I've been there. I've been the nurse that was like coming home and drinking a bottle of wine to like shut my mind off, right? So I get it. And so I do think it's really important to remember this. And if we're talking about caring for ourselves, that we really do have to think about ways, especially it working in those environments, right? Where how
Yes. High
do you,
speed, high speed
right,
kind of energy.
high energy, and it's just adrenaline constantly. So your adrenals are shot. You are totally sympathetic nervous system activation, like constant. It doesn't shut off. There's no parasympathetic time, right? So I love that you're bringing this up, in this conversation around letting the mind go to sleep, um, naturally. Like what can we do to bring that into our lives more?
Exactly. And so I wanted to, I don't want to kind of get too much solutions because we can save that for the end, but two things you said that's super important and why in today's kind of anecdotal things of what you can do to fall asleep actually makes sense. So one thing you said, right? But it follows on two concepts. One is you guys go home and you take a hot bath, right? Usually calms you down. Well, I'll explain why. Second is you guys drink. Interesting. What does drinking do? It dilates your blood, right? And so you get blood everywhere. Interesting. We'll talk about that. So those are really interesting, right? Both of those actually are cardiovascular systems that you just did.
Right.
Why? Because hot water dilates blood. And what happens is the blood then goes to the rest of your body. So when you're moving around, what happens is your body's moving and the blood's going there, but the blood always has to go back to the brain.
Right.
because the brain is your operating system. You have to process information, right? So what happens is you're running on adrenaline, and what happens, you're speeding blood through your brain because you're constantly moving really fast. And so your blood has to go to the brain, process information, come back down. But what happened is we overthink. When you think, you're bringing blood to the brain. That's it. That's the idea is pretty self-explanatory, right? If you're not thinking, you just don't have blood coming up there. I mean, it's kind of a joke, but this is why people call airheads because there's no blood coming up. But when there is blood coming up to the head, you are processing information, but you're also using up blood. But you're
Right.
also using up the arteries that send blood to the brain, right?
Right.
So oftentimes people say, "Oh, I have a headache," because you got blood pressuring into the veins in your head.
Right.
And so if you're constantly having that, it's kind of like, we talk about freeways, right? Common freeway. You have a fast freeway, but you got to turn the corner. You're still going to hit accidents there.
Yeah.
So what's happening is you're basically everyone in the city is going up to your head, right? Traffic builds up to your head. So now you have traffic building up around your head. And so when you now finally like you get to rest, you go home, your body is still filling up with adrenaline, right? That means that your mind is still racing, so you're still sending blood just to your head.
Right.
So finally you sit down, but your blood is so used to sending blood up to your head, it's only staying here. So what happens if we look at this cardiovascular system here, you sit down, your legs are no longer sending blood and your hands are no longer sending blood. Where does the blood go? If you have 100% blood, but yet none of them is going to your legs and none of them is going to your arms, where's it going? To your head.
Right.
That
Yeah.
means your mind is so active because blood is rushing to it constantly. So now you sit down into a hot bath. What happens when the blood dilates into your body? The blood in your head goes to your body.
Right. Right.
And that's
It
why you suddenly get a rush down your head, and suddenly your mind feels calm because there's no more blood rushing into your head.
Wow. Thank you for
Same,
painting that picture.
yeah. So same thing with alcohol. You suddenly become dilated and you calm down because
Yep.
your blood is everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So it's very beautiful how if we understand just the mechanics of how our organs work, we will come up with our own solution that is useful, right? So now today when we come up with like even counting, actually, I don't think counting is very useful because you're using your brain still, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
This
Right.
is why like we now talk about meditation, where it's kind of like yes, thoughts come up, but you are not forcing the thoughts. Because when you force the thoughts, you send more blood up. But when
Right.
you're just sitting there and you're just watching things come up and you just throw it away, because that's the idea of meditation, you don't really care about the thoughts that are coming. You're no longer sending blood to your head to process the information. And so, and in that breathing, right? Because we do a lot of meditative breathing. What happens with breathing? We're bringing more oxygen to the blood. And so the blood fills up with oxygen, sending it to the rest of the body, not to your head.
Right.
And that's why now suddenly after meditation, like, oh, I can go to sleep now because I'm
Yeah.
not thinking about anything.
Yeah, I think that's why also like practices like yoga nidra are really powerful to do as well because, I mean, essentially it it can be thought of as like a body scan kind of, right? And so if you're focusing on that and your breath and whatnot, it is taking away from all that blood going to your head and then stimulating thoughts that don't allow for that deep relaxation, that sleep, that brain sleep that we need to
Exactly.
heal, to live, to exist. And so many of us aren't getting that quality sleep.
Yeah. And the last two pieces are just diagnostic again, opening into the tongue. So actually, whatever's going on in your tongue, we can actually tell the color, what's going on in your tongue, the ridges, actually different location in your tongue tells us which organs are affected. So it's really powerful. That's why like, it's ironic. Today, like there's a lot of TikTok videos now. They're like, hey, stick out your tongue. And all I do is go, oh, and I stare and diagnose their tongue.
Oh
This
my
is what
God.
happens when you start learning this medicine. Anytime someone sticks out their tongue, you go, well, I just learned a little bit about what's going on inside you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Now you got to ask everybody to stick their tongue out when they
Well, exactly now, right? Actually, when people are like, maybe are mean to me, they stick out their tongue, go, well, wait, do it again. Oh, did you know you got some?
let me tell you about yourself.
Exactly.
Oh man, that's funny.
And then the last piece is sweat. So really sweat is, we understand this kind of like when we get nervous, we get a little sweaty. Also, when you get cardiovascular, you get hot, you get sweaty. So the sweat comes out. So understanding the smell of sweat, if you're getting sweaty at all, if you are very sweaty, all those tell us your condition of your heart. Okay, so all these are really beautiful ways to help us understand internally what's going on with the heart, but why the heart is important. Because you can see in these kind of ideas, they don't just control the beating of the heart and blood. They actually have a deeper meaning, and one of them is this mind and heart connection that we can kind of go a little bit further into because that's a very important aspect of the heart.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you bring that up because something I would like to share has been this idea of the heart brain, and which actually you have that beautiful picture right
Mm-hmm.
there. So
Yeah.
there we go. There we've got a heart brain, and really to kind of just like bring it all back to, if we're talking about modern, a little bit more of like the modern wisdom catching up to what perhaps I would conclude has been known for thousands of years through these modalities. But it's great that we have this research now to really reinforce and to use to integrate into our modern world and modern way of living. And so this idea of the heart mind, so there is this research that has come out through heart math, which is an organization that has lots of programs related to this research that they've created, and they're implementing it into hospital systems and universities and everywhere. They're out there, but I really want to just focus like on the research and the simplification of it all, and that they basically have discovered that, yeah, there we go. They have basically discovered that in the heart there is this intrinsic cardiac nervous system that basically it's called the sensory neurites. And so, yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. Nice. We got that. So basically there is an intricate network of complex ganglia, neurotransmitters, proteins, and support cells, which are all the same in the, like, basically the same in the brain. And in fact, what they found is that the pathways, like the neural pathways that send messages to and from the heart to the cerebral brain, there's actually more neural pathways that send messages from the heart to the brain than there are from the brain to the heart, like significantly more. And so this research is showing that, and so if we accept that as like, okay, like, well, what's going on there? Right? And so like that's so fascinating to me. And then they've also in their research talked about the magnetic field of the heart, which is essentially the chakras, like the chakra vortex, right, which is the energy field. And so and how that that comes out around, I mean, I don't remember exactly like how many feet they've measured it to be, but that it essentially,
Around 6 feet, depending on, yeah.
right, like 6 feet.
6 feet, right? 6 feet. So if you're staying away 6 feet apart,
How do your hearts connect, right? Exactly.
yeah,
but
interesting.
but so yeah, so we have this field which again now is being supported by modern research and data. And so it's like, okay, so we have this information and we know that there's this heart brain. And so when it comes to heart disease or heart issues related to the heart, what about heartbreak? Like, what about these emotional things? And as I've been studying in my own studies of like Ayurveda, which I've been studying now for a few years, recently I just completed a clinical Ayurveda course with my teacher, and we were talking about the specific organs and what they're connected to. And the heart specifically is connected to attachment, according to Ayurveda. So if we think about it, I mean, and again, this research does show people who have experienced like heartbreak or grief or any sort, if there's any sort of attachment, which is essentially a need to belong, right? Like attachment is just this needing for belonging. So
Mhm.
wherever that exists, like we are potentially creating disease in the heart, right? Which we are now getting like the rundown of the biomechanics from the TCM perspective or whatnot. We know like what the heart is doing for our body. So it's kind of interesting to then now look at this and see these perspectives and realize that like maybe these, or ask the questions like, so are these diseases of the heart really related to a physical issue? Like, is it a physical problem?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
This is kind of where I think both of us have had some hypotheses about this, right? We talk a lot about this with heartbreaks, right? And it doesn't have to be relationship heartbreaks. We see this when animals, right? Their partners die, and the animal's like, I'm out.
And
I
humans,
cannot
like
live with that
human
person.
animals, human
Yeah,
animals, the same thing, right? Like, how
yeah.
many times do these, we've seen it where there's like a couple that's been married for 70 years and one partner dies, and within like weeks, the other one is right behind. I
Follows
mean, I
exactly.
recently just heard about a family that I know that experienced that. So,
Yeah, and it just shows how important, that connection that we have. It's really interesting. Hugs is the place where hearts meet, right? And
yeah,
this is where we release all these chemicals in our body that actually gives us connection,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so it's really interesting that today, we're afraid to hug because, somebody's got some kind of crazy disease, right? And so what's really been tough is
Scabies. I don't want to hug you because you might have scabies.
exactly, exactly. He got the cooties again.
The
I mean,
cooties.
really? We got cooties again?
Something, speaking of hugs, that I've been practicing when I hug people is to hug them on the left side, so that
Oh, I see. Heart to heart.
I feel like more people, granted, yes, our heart is like should be more in the center. It's not actually off all the way off to the left, but still, it's like if you're going to the right, you're further away. So like, let's get in there, So I like we'll go in. I feel like it's automatic for us to go to the right, and I just switch it up and I just go to the left, and people are like, oh, okay, this kind of feels nice,
Oh, I see. I see. Okay,
right?
okay. Yeah,
Right.
no, you're right. Yeah.
So
I
I
think it's that
encourage you guys to
idea
try that.
we're probably also very, right dominant. So our
Yeah.
right comes in and leans more, right?
I think so. I think that has to do with it. So I encourage you all to try that next time someone comes in for a hug and see how it feels. Hug them on the left side.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes, I love kind of when you get the strong hippies. They're like, you get a hug and they go, no, no, Charlie, heart to heart. And I was like,
Oh,
oh
heart
yes,
to
give it to me. Yeah, and when
yeah.
I first heard that, I was like, I could feel the difference. I'm like, yo, I want heart to heart hugs. I don't want these half-ass, give me one arm over
Telling you.
hugs. Yeah,
I'm telling you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Heart
I
to
mean,
heart hugs are amazing because like you don't need to know the other person, but you feel the other person, and that's
yeah.
very beautiful.
And hugging and just in general, like let's just hug more. I think
Yes,
that's
please.
yeah. Let's just encourage each other to hug. Let's touch each other. Let's come back to remembering that hugging and touch is where we
Yes.
come from,
And
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 yeah,
and I feel like this is where we should normalize hugs while still giving, people an ability to say no for consent. Cuz I know people are getting a little too crazy with consent, but like, yo, it's a hug. It's a hug. Like
yeah.
calm down, but yes, I understand like, don't force anyone to do what they cannot.
Sure.
But
Yeah, we
I'm
never know what people are
sorry.
coming
If
in
you
with.
don't want a hug, that's you missing out on medicine, yo. Like,
100%.
that's why like sometimes as people who want to take care of others, sometimes we have to find ways to break through their walls. Because you can't say, I understand people are like, I don't want to be hugged right now and blah blah blah, which is fine. But then when they're the ones crying out because their life sucks, they're struggling, no one's talking to them,
Yeah,
it's unfortunate, but you are causing that isolation yourself, right?
yeah,
Um, and come on, I'm an empath just like everybody else. So like, if you're like, I'm so empathic, I can't touch you. I'm like, then you're missing out on life. You shouldn't be down here avoiding life, avoiding people, avoiding touching
yeah,
humans, right? Because
yeah.
then you should have reincarnated in Tibet in a cave, okay? Like, don't come here when there's so many humans that
You
really
chose this.
Yeah, I chose
Yeah.
this because I left Tibet and I've had many past lives as a monk, and this time like I came in and say, I want damn hugs, give me more hugs.
I am always a supportive hugs. And granted, disclaimer, yes, if people, one thing is like having some trauma or whatnot that you're worried, but and still like hugs are healing. They,
Yeah.
you're releasing oxytocin. It's literally doing something to the body. So like, let's just hug more if we can.
Exactly. And I grew up French. For the first 10 years of my life, I kissed everybody in the cheek and gave them hugs. So I came to America and they're like, don't touch me.
Oh my gosh, I know that.
Don't
Yeah.
touch me. I don't know what's wrong with you. And I'm like, okay,
I
then
know it's very different here. My
handshake.
culture
You're
is
like,
the same.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. My culture is the same. We kiss on the cheek, and that's just what comes natural for me. And so yes, I still do it. And sometimes I like to challenge people who don't expect it. And a lot of times, like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
you know,
I feel like once you like kiss on the cheek, you're like, you're no longer a stranger. So
yeah,
don't treat me like one, and
okay,
this is where today when we're like, unity, unity, but don't touch me. You're like, unity, that means let's go in unity. Let's, we are water. We are water droplets trying to find each other, right?
yeah.
And so there's
Yeah,
a
and now even talking about this heart, this like this auric field, this what scientists want to refer to as
magnetic field.
magnetic. Yes, magnetic.
Magnetic attracts and repels.
Right. So that's true, right? So we know we do have this magnetic field. And I think like I'm curious too, Charlie, let's talk about some solutions of like how what are some tools or that folks can use that could be helpful to start being connecting to the tenderness in the heart and really becoming more aware maybe of what's going on in that heart brain. What does TCM recommend?
Well,
If
TCM,
we're talking about not pathology like
yeah.
wise, like, so somebody that's just healthy or maybe like is who knows, everybody has some heartbreak and goes through things like that, but not talking about for like heart disease specifically because that requires, as we know, like
Yeah, right,
very
right.
specific
Yeah.
individual assessment.
Some of the things, and I'm gonna say this in transparency, I'm a Leo rising. So if I'm not connected to my heart, actually I will attract very negative experiences to my life,
Mm,
right? And that's very important why in astrology we give the heart to the Leos because their job is to attract the reality they love
mm,
from the heart. That means the heart creates a vibration that attracts something. Meaning if you're afraid, you attract it.
yeah,
If you're happy, you're attracted, right? It's
yeah,
not bad, it's not good, it's you're choosing to attract with your heart energy.
yeah.
So one of the things I like to share, so and because acupuncture, Chinese medicine is a very physical medicine currently, and we have not necessarily brought back the ancient medicine that brings in the mind and the spirit. I'm really inferring a lot of my knowledge. Also, I studied astrology and I love psychology and anthropology. I love human designs and idea of human psychology. And so I find that there's more healing to the heart in the emotional space than there is in the physical space.
Mm,
If we're talking straight physical, we're clearly the number one death. So physically, it's not the problem.
yeah.
And I think this is where how many of us have been, someone said, go see a shrink. I actually do see a lot of patients that actually, are very emotional when they come to our table sometimes and they start crying, right? And so we have to understand that we don't go, oh, you're crying, this is the problem. You have to understand why they're crying because sometimes emotionally they can't handle something.
And how much
Um,
is being like, how much are we holding? Like, I mean, there's times
right.
that I, have found myself in my life where I just, burst into tears and I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? Kind of thing. So we're just not even
Exactly.
aware, right?
Right. So I feel like what's happening to the heart mind relationship, and the heart mind should be thought of as like the right leg and the left leg, right?
Okay.
Without one or the other, they don't exist. Okay.
Okay.
This is why people should not say the mind beats the heart beats the mind. It's the same thing. They need to be next to each other.
Well, and if you
But
think about the heart, the three brains, right? We have the gut brain, which we know exists as well. We have the heart brain, we have the cerebral brain, and what's in the middle of all of those three? Like the heart, right? So the
yes,
heart is in the middle. I mean, so that's like speaks to a lot
yeah,
of its power.
exactly. Yeah. And so they kind of all come towards the middle. And so we talk a lot about how, all our idioms actually are based on this idea that the heart is your desires. It's your soul's desire to express your soul's journey.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so what's happening in a lot of our lives today, and so what happened a lot of time is I end up having psychological conversation and therapy conversation with my
Of
patients.
course. Yes.
Um,
Always. Always.
right? And that's why they come back because I'm not here just to put needles. It's a
Welcome.
person.
Welcome to the
Yeah.
field.
It's a person, y'all. I treat people. I don't treat bodies. And so,
Exactly.
people
Exactly.
come with a lot of baggage. And so what happens is they hold on very tightly and you find it in their bodies. You find them hold on to things, right? And
Yeah.
so when I put needles, what happens? It
Literally.
releases everything. And sometimes they'll start blurting out what's happening,
Mm.
and then I'll listen and I go, interesting. And then I'll really kind of get them to think about why they're going through that. Because really, the deeper conversation is you're dealing with something that you haven't processed yet. And so I feel like emotions will trigger the heart to understand what your heart needs to go through, whether it's called shadow work, whether it's called desires work, those will get triggered. Then comes the trigger of the mind because the mind needs to find a solution to retune to the heart. This
Mhm.
is kind of like why if you think too much, you get a headache and you have no idea what you want to do. But then people go here and they go into their heart, they shut up and they feel their heart and go, I want to do this, right?
Mm.
It's almost
I
like
love
you allow
that.
the heart to speak, and then people go, that's what I want to do because my heart triggered that emotion out of me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yet when you're afraid, you hold your heart very closely, you close your heart. And this is when we say closed heart chakra, I mean you're not willing to see new experiences. And so
Mhm.
even with your shadow, we're not meant to have the solutions to face our shadow the day it happens. Actually, the shadows show up, and I'm talking about shadow like you're afraid maybe of like going to the dentist, but you need to go to the dentist. So when you don't face the dentist, you're gonna get worse off with your teeth.
Right.
And so
Well, it depends
facing
on what dentist we're talking about, but that's also
yes,
another story.
yes, yes. And we're gonna stay in the, we'll stay in the mainstream Western
Yeah.
conservative
Yeah.
healing space right now. We don't have to attack everybody all at once.
It's
Yeah,
all
but so
love. It's all love. And it's all about
exactly.
health. It's all
It's
about
it's
health.
all about evolution, y'all.
Right.
We
Right.
make mistakes so we can get better. And that's the idea of shadow work. Shadow work means that didn't work very well, keep at it, right?
Yeah.
And so if anything, like even video games, why do we have hearts as life? Because the stronger your heart is, the more you'll face challenges and the more you face shadows. When you face a shadow, you have a stronger blood, stronger heart. You can, and that's why people say you have a stronger constitution to face challenges in life. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times what happened today, we see it today, people whine, people bitch, people blame, and people want other people to make them feel better. And all it is they don't feel good for themselves. They are holding everything in. So their heart is at a dis as is not at ease. So it's considered dis-ease, right? It's
Mhm.
not at an ease, it's not at a very comfortable space because
Yeah.
this feels conflicted. So, I think one of the biggest advice I like to tell people is learn to listen and feel your heart when you make decisions. Because too often your brain can make up 1,000 excuses not to do something.
Yeah.
But if your heart feels like it's afraid, that should tell you you should be facing that fear. The faster you face your fear, the less you build deficiencies in your body. The reason why I call it deficiency is because when you're afraid, every time you're afraid, what happens? Oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't know it. And you freak out, your body hyperventilate, and you're using up energy.
Yeah.
So imagine every time you're being afraid, you're using energy, and then you didn't do anything. You're
Right.
just afraid. And so, it's when you do something you're fulfilled that you feel like, oh, I felt like I beat that, right? I have enough courage that I beat that shadow, right? So when we're not doing that, this is where people are not feeling fulfilled, they don't feel good about themselves, and this is where now the heart attack problems happen because now what are you doing? You're actually attacking your heart. When
Yeah.
you're not allowing your heart to express, you tell a child that wants to say something because it's really happy, shut up and sit there and don't say anything. What happened to that smile? He goes,
Yeah. Hmm.
right, and that's what your heart goes through when we're not allowing it to speak up. So I think one of the biggest thing is maybe we do more mental emotional healing by allowing ourselves to feel our heart and not be judged by it, right? Because that's
Yeah, I
really
think the
important.
self-judgment has been
Yeah,
in my experience and observation, the self-judgment piece of what we are how we are causing like extra harm to ourselves is huge. It's like we are thinking about things and saying things to ourselves that we would never even say to somebody in front of us. And so yeah, and that's one thing I would start with and in addition to your awesome advice there is like let's start looking at how we talk to ourselves and like how the conversations, the internal conversations, like what am I saying, like how do I feel about myself, like looking in the mirror, what's coming up, when I look in the mirror and sitting with that. And I think that that's the hardest part is because this shadow work is really uncomfortable. It's not, it doesn't feel good to do. So that's why so many aren't doing it, because it's not going to be comfortable to be in that space. And as we've talked about many times before, that shadow is most of the time where you find your superpower.
right.
That's like where you can harness and hone our superpowers. And actually, that's where the heart is, I think, too, is like when we can connect and feel. I love how you said, like, feel into the heart is really like allowing us to feel what's going on. Like, how does that, and this is actually where I think, and I can't wait to dive into another episode where we talk about the gut brain. But
Mm,
like, this is where I feel like the heart and the gut brain communicate really, really well is then when is that and that's where the intuition is like ooh, is this connected to my purpose, is this connected to like what do I feel good, and they communicate. And so I think that like listening to like starting to tune in to like how's the gut feeling, then like how's the heart feeling, and so that requires us to get quiet and to maybe do it in times where where we don't have those distractions. Um and I will just say, like, I think community is everything. I think that at the
yes,
end of the day,
right.
any sort of healing is only going to happen in community. That's like where our ancestors come from. Like that is the tradition of healing for centuries has been in community. And I think that one of the things that I would love for us to evolve through and integrate into our systems is that aspect of community being like a core piece of anything anyone's going through, because we're already so like separated from each other in this modern age. Like we don't even know our neighbors across the street or the people
Right.
that live above us if you live in an apartment, so how can we connect more into community to receive that support that allows us to open our hearts even more, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah. Was
Yes.
there
This is
anything else we want to add, Charlie, that we want to like leave people with today on this Valentine's Day?
yes, actually one small thing. Because I think as much as we all grown up with Valentine's, we've always believed that Valentine was a couples thing. And since recent years of I feel like a lot of us have grown up past what our parents told us to believe in and our government told us to believe in holidays. Like we've moved away from this consumerism. And I think what we're trying to do now is how do we win back what it means to be in love again, right? And I think what's happened is a lot of heartaches is because you don't love yourself. So you think somebody has to teach you how to love yourself. And then you have terrible relationships that happen because on Valentine's Day, you feel extra lonely. And then you hope someone's going to hook up with you because you feel so desperate that that person feels desperate. And, nothing wrong with people desperate. I'm in school right now. I could be pretty much desperate as much as the next person. Um, but then the power comes from actually you knowing how to treat yourself first so that you can train the person that falls in love with you to treat you correctly, right? Because that's really important. And I feel like sometimes we should be considering Valentine's as more of a love awareness moment, whether
Yeah,
it's yourself first. Because if you find love for yourself, you'll be so attractive to the opposite sex, y'all. Like you don't even understand, right? And this is why people say, like, that man looks so confident. You see, looks like he loves himself.
yeah,
That means you're gonna love him too, right? Because have you
yeah,
ever met someone that like hates themselves and you want to hang out with them and they're just so negative that you have a hard time even like wanting to be around that energy, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
this is
Thank
where
you
I
for
think
bringing it
it's a
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important to find love for yourself without judgment, right? And this is why it's important to understand what your heart feels like, what you feel like first. Because a lot of times I feel like the brain is more like an antenna to receive information,
Mm,
but the
mhm.
heart is what is the soul's expression. So we pick up ideas from other people all the time by talking to them. That's why the brain and the mind picks up. This is a giant antenna. We got ears, eyes, nose to like take in information. But then it's when we bring into the heart inside of our body that we go, is that information sticking inside my heart? No, then the information doesn't make sense. Because
Right.
a lot of times we like to believe, oh, all my friends say this is good, so I'll do it. And
Right.
then what happens? Your heart shuts down because it doesn't come into the heart. You don't actually absorb the information, you're just regurgitating it. So this is where I feel like the reason we have so much heartaches is because we let the mind decide everything.
Yeah. 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 Thanks for saying that. And I think that's a perfect way to also bring it back to, um, care for the caregivers, right? And allowing us to give ourselves, like, not just a fraction, but more love than we give to others, because we have to actually do a lot more of this work, simply because we are showing up for people who are sick.
Exactly.
So, and absorbing things, right? And like, we are these antennas, we feel things, like, and our body responds to it. So, so this idea of self-love, and this term that we all have been saying about self-care, it really is necessary. So whatever that, and that looks like different for all of us, but you're right. When you love yourself, and when you feel, and when you embody that love, and like, you are going to be attracted. It is magnetism. So we talk about magnetism, right? It is magnetism. People are magnetized and attracted to that, all, no matter who they are. Animals, like, everyone's attracted to it, they feel it, and it feels good to be around. So if you want to attract other people to be around you, if that's, because that's what's going to make you feel supported, then you've got to love yourself first, right? So, absolutely, I think that that's been a journey for all of us, and continues to be a journey for all of us, because unfortunately, we don't have systems in place that, support this cultivation of self-love. And so, and with that, I'll say that I want to, I forgot to say this in the beginning, but the show is sponsored by our beautiful nonprofit, Cultivating Self, which is doing exactly this, and supporting caregivers to care for themselves, and really rejuvenating the healers in so many different ways, and really actually focused on systems change, because we have spent far too long focused on individuals needing to do things for themselves, and even these things that we're recommending, for people to do, we're still not negating the greater picture and the system that needs to evolve, which is this health system. And so, how can we, which is why we're here, to have these discussions, bring on awesome experts and people who can share their wisdom, ancient, modern, whatever you want to call it, system, and creating those bridges where we can bridge that and truly integrate it with what exists now, and also envision what does it look like to build something new where everyone's supported, not just the caregivers, but the community as a whole, like we said in the beginning. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Charlie, for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Yes, this was a
Love
beautiful show. I
so
love talking
fun.
about the heart and love, so I'm really excited that hope everybody had an opportunity to enjoy this conversation. And also, real quick, when we say love yourself, because we are representing the healer's journey, we are empathic. So because of that, we need to love ourselves more. We're not obviously saying this to the narcissistic who don't care about healing people. Clearly, they know how to take care of themselves. I'm obviously we're speaking to basically those people who love to take care of themselves more than themselves because they think they're healers and they don't want to heal themselves. That's who we're talking to, right? And I think everybody understand what that means when you have someone who just over takes care but not takes care of themselves. That's really this whole self-care and self-love is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so excited for the show, and that we were able to really, like, dive in today and kind of, give people a preview, because we're going to talk to experts in psychology and different like aspects of psychology, Ayurveda, all of these things, everything around health. Like nothing is off the table here. And so we're going to just dive in and invite everybody in who is also aligned with this vision of evolving this healthcare system to support caregivers. But thank you again, Charlie, for sharing your wisdom and what you've been picking up and learning. And we're so excited to finally be able to call you Dr. Charlie.
Thank you.
And that will be very soon. You're studying for your
Yes.
board, so staying busy. And we'll look forward to more of your you showcasing your content with us as well, because I do think it's so powerful to bring the medicine back to people. This, the traditional medicine back to people, and really empowering us as individuals. You don't need to go study this stuff and pay hundreds of
Exactly.
thousands of dollars. Like this is information that
Should
we
have.
all should
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
right?
It empowers you to be in control of your health, and this is why, like, when I talk to my patients, I'm like, we're in this together, right? If you're not doing the work, why are you paying me to do all the work? Like, you're not going to get the right effect. And so a lot of times I can't sit down and teach people what traditional Chinese medicine does so they understand their body. So by allowing this information to be as, simple enough so that the teenage level can understand it, I think it will make tremendous strides for people to then understand what they need in their healthcare. And that's why today's conversation, this is not about administrators coming in to tell people how to live their healthcare, right? We want the patients here. We want the ones who are not being represented.
Yeah,
Tune into your heart and speak up for the type of healthcare, wellness care that we deserve, right?
yeah,
We deserve this, and we need to
yeah.
speak up from our heart. So let us work together. Everyone, please make sure to follow, subscribe. We're continuing to develop the show, but please add comments whether you want more on the heart or more on something else, more on TCM or Ayurveda. It allows us to find more speakers or even gather topics that you guys are interested in, so we can have conversations about it. And hopefully we're gonna eventually allow more guests, not guests, chats and live chats to be on, so we can kind of continue speaking to our audience. But right now we're still technically trying to figure all this out. So please, keep following us as we kind of build out the show together.
Yes, and check out cultivatingself.org. That's our nonprofit that we are committed to, and that's sponsoring the show. And get in touch with us, subscribe there, subscribe to the channel, and we're looking forward to seeing you guys next time.
Yes. So thank you,
Ciao.
y'all. Have a good evening,
Bye.
everyone.